Welcome to the podcast version of the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Wednesday. What is this? October 18th, 2017. I told you every now and then that I wanted to do the shows like this because there's a different experience when we do it like this. I get a chance to, I don't know, not that I'm not free to speak with an audience, but I think that there's just a qualitatively different experience when I do a podcast only, and I wanted to share it tonight. Not only that, but man, what is up with Atlanta traffic? I promise you, I've lived in Miami, I've lived in Fort Lauderdale, I've lived in Jacksonville, I lived in Boston, I've lived in quite a few places, and I've never been in a city where if one single damn car breaks down, the entire highway shuts down for miles. So I left the studio, I left work at 6 o'clock this evening, and I wanted to be live at 8 o'clock. I didn't get here till 2 minutes ago. Well, maybe 10 minutes ago, but still I got here. It took me 2 hours to drive. Anyway, let me stop complaining. But Atlanta, I need you all to work on your highway system. It is out of control. I want to talk about something serious tonight. I guess every night is something serious, but this one is particularly, I might make some enemies with this, but whatever, you guys know I don't mind that, and I might lose some friends. More importantly, I might lose some friends. I've had it up to here with the anti-imperialist crowd that doesn't seem to be able of critiquing U.S. empire or U.S. hegemony, however you want to describe it, and showing empathy for soldiers, many of whom are enlisted soldiers who saw that the military was their only way out of poverty, only way out of the ghetto, out of the hood, out of their sick, out of the trailer park, whatever situation they came from. I'm talking specifically about Sergeant LaDavid Johnson. He was a 25-year-old Green Beret killed in Niger. He was from Miami Gardens, Florida. He was just a regular kid from the streets. And he had a feature. There was a feature on Channel 10 News locally that featured him years ago when he was a teenager. And he was known as the Wheelie King because he could pop a wheelie and ride a wheelie for hours. And, you know, he was just a kid. And today, while we're sharing in our angst with the president of the United States who made a callous phone call, a sociopath who's completely incapable of showing empathy. He can't even fake empathy. That's the depth of his sociopathy, sociopathy rather. That's the depth of it. He can't even fake empathy. And in the midst of us exploring that, I had several people. And maybe it's my fault, right? It's my fault because I have so many followers and my reach. Yeah, I don't have that many. I mean, 35,000, but it's not that many, I don't think. But my reach is so far that I'm inundated with stupidness all damn day long. And I kept getting hits from people, comments from people that suggested that if we really were concerned, we would show empathy before they got deployed and not deploy them, instead of showing empathy now. Or, you know, why are we focusing on this when we should be focusing on why our empire or our militaristic, our imperialistic military is in Niger in the first place? You know, we can answer those questions. We can ask that particular question, you know, but God, please, can we for a second have a bit of empathy for a person? Here's the thing. If your disdain for the American empire is so absolute that you feel that it is useless for you to show empathy to a fallen soldier, this is not empathy in the sense of patriotism, because mother F patriotism. I'm talking about empathy for humanity. This has nothing to do with the stars and stripes, the red, white, and blue, and God bless America. No, this has everything to do with the human life that was lost. More importantly than the life that was lost, because I particularly am not afraid of death. I'm okay with that. I don't care what happens after or if nothing happens. I'm quite okay with the idea of a peaceful oblivion. I'm even more so than the person who died. Can you not have empathy for the people who are left behind to grieve? And if your disdain for America's empire is so absolute that you cannot show empathy for people who are stuck with the pain of losing such a young man, a father, a husband, and a son, if your disdain is that absolute, then you should look in the mirror and hate yourself because you are still paying your taxes. Because I'm sorry, if you're so absolute that you cannot show empathy to a fallen soldier, let me rephrase that. If it's so absolute that you cannot show empathy to a fallen human being, then surely you should be disgusted with yourself for the fact that you're funding that military with your taxes. And yet you don't have the bravery to be a conscientious objector and be willing to go to jail for not paying taxes because you don't want to support the American empire. See, people, and it's particularly on the left, man, on the right, you have the opposite of stupidity. You have the other end of the spectrum of stupidity where they will honor, they don't want you to question anything about our military because they think you're, whatever. You know their games. Like, you're not patriotic. I don't give a damn about patriotism, man. I don't care. I care about America to several extents that I'm not quite ready to dictate at this point. Not in this conversation. I don't want to go off on a tangent. But bump patriotism from the fatuous perspective of you have to agree with everything a president says so long as they're a Republican president and so long as it's done in the name of democracy and freedom. That's the other end of stupid. But then on the flip side, the left end of stupid is we can't even take a moment to show empathy to a fallen soldier. I mean, it's like people go through painstaking contortions every time we address a military person who's died or we address a person who's in military. They always go, well, we don't want to make any comments about any positive comments about America's imperialistic military, but such and such, such and such. Right. They give all these equivocations and all these caveats at the beginning. They can't even say, damn, I'm hurt that this person is dead. I'm hurt that this 6-year-old little girl is going to have to grow up without a father. Her 2-year-old brother is never going to know his father. He's not old enough to have any solid memories of his father. And then there's a baby on the way who will never know his father. And then you can't even express anger with the fact that the president of the United States is incapable of showing empathy. Or perhaps you think, this is the other thing, man, I'm going all out. I'm going all in. I don't even care anymore because this is the height of stupidity for me in terms of leftist perspective and anti-imperialist. I don't even have to give you my bona fides anymore. I don't. I mean, there's very few people in this game, in this commentary game, who's able to dissect the problems of American hegemony and the American empire and the complexities of why it exists and why we can't ever seem to get away with it. I don't even have to go through that again. But I tell you, I'm so tired of people who have this absolutist view of the world, yet they don't have a single goddamn solution to get us past this. They can criticize the American hegemony, but I've yet to see them offer one idea that is actually feasible for us to follow, a path to follow to, you know what their answer is? Absolve the U.S. presidency. Like, okay. That sounds great for a tweet, man. That sounds great for an article post. That sounds great for you to gather amongst you and your other socialist friends. I'm a socialist, but I'm going to say it. All of your socialist friends and have intellectual conversations about why we should dissolve the U.S. presidency. But please, Sway, tell me how you plan to get there without causing more bloodshed that's already been shed. It's what I'm like with a lot of people who are communists to the extent that they actually want communism in praxis. Please tell me, how do we get there without shedding? Not that it's impossible to get there, but how do we get there without shedding more blood than we're currently sharing? Because if you could tell me that, I will be the first in line to advocate for that all day, every day, without fail. Then the problem in Catalonia that I never got a chance to go back with is how do you maintain it without becoming the same imperialistic force that you oppose and hate so much? This is not me punching left. This is me punching against the lack of empathy because of an absolutist mentality that is quite fatuous in that it does not have any ability to become reality without shedding blood, the very blood that you disdain so much right now. And this is not to say that we should not push for more socialist policies. I mean, I got a list that I'm dedicating myself to, an entire list of policies that are going to be called socialist right now. But in actuality, they're just democratic socialists at best. But I have policies that I think that we should push for and not stop until we get them implemented. So this is not to say that we should accept the system as it is right now. This is to say that while you are promoting and why you are pontificating is the word I'm looking for. While you are sitting around pontificating about how we should dissolve the U.S. presidency and you're spending your time there, You are throwing salt in the game of people who are in the system right now trying to change the system and push us. It's like absolutism versus incrementalism. You're an absolutist and it sounds good on paper and it sounds good intellectually, but you don't have a single goddamn plan to get us there. Meanwhile, that absolutist mentality prevents you from showing empathy. You are, in my opinion, you are almost as bad as Donald Trump. Donald Trump couldn't show empathy because he's a sociopath and he doesn't know how to care for anybody else besides himself. But some of the people that I'm talking about can't show empathy because in their world, you aren't supposed to show empathy to soldiers because they're soldiers. Never mind the fact that they're human beings first. The same empathy that I feel towards citizens of Iraq who were killed by our soldiers is the same empathy that I could feel for the soldiers who were killed in Iraq. But yet, so for some people, they can't handle that dissonance because they can only feel empathy for the victims. Somebody said it today that this system makes monsters and victims out of all of us. And if you can't handle that complexity, then you aren't looking in the mirror and realizing how complicit you are to this empire by paying your taxes every day and not having the bravery to be a conscientious objector and go to jail for your beliefs. Yet you want to sit behind Twitter all damn day and talk about why we should not mourn or say anything about this soldier. I think I've got that out my chest. I'm sorry for yelling. I hope this phone didn't get distorted. 1, 2. I'm recording this on my iPhone. But it is so frustrating. It is so frustrating when I see leftists go into the land of absolutism and they enjoy. It's like, you know what we can't afford as leftists? This is how leftism got defeated in the first place. This is how we're so far behind. Besides the fact of a couple of particular assassinations that took place in the 60s that set the progressive movement behind for an entire generation. Setting that aside, you know what was left? What was left? There was a former, I don't know if he was a speechwriter or an advisor to JFK who started talking about the arrogance of the left. And how the left, during the Vietnam War, they attacked soldiers just as much as they attacked the system, the enlisted man as much as they attacked the generals. They yelled at the soldiers coming back home. And you know what? The fact is, it's not about the optics of it, man. It's not just the fact that it's bad optics and it's bad politics and it can be used against you. It's not about that, even though it is strategically stupid for you to do that, because from a political perspective, it becomes so much easier to attack you because of your idiocy, and you're a complete moron if you attack soldiers in that way, because it's just politically it's politically, what's the word I'm looking for? It's toxic. It's politically toxic, but notwithstanding the fact that it's just purely horrible optics. But you are a horrible human being if you cannot see the complexity of the fact that, like I'm stealing from someone on Twitter today, this system makes monsters and victims out of all of us, you included, you who've never picked up a gun for this empire, you who've never picked up a Roman shield for the Roman Empire, you who've never went out and killed anyone. You are just as complicit because your tax is funded, and you are too much of a coward to not pay those taxes and to suffer the consequences. So I'm calling bullshit on all of them. Everybody who falls into that category. It's disgusting to me on so many levels. Forget the politics of it. Politics completely aside. It is the most disgusting to me because of the mental block that you put up that prevents you from showing empathy. And what the hell are we in this for if not to treat each other more like humans than the establishment does? What are we in this for if we're not here to identify with the humanity of each other? What are we doing this for, people? Why are you in this? Why are you in this if you're not more concerned about it? Why would we? I'm sorry, let me change that. I am not in this just for a political agenda if that political agenda does not express more empathy and concern and love and compassion for our neighbor. See, this is where my religiosity probably parts ways from you, because I am not capable. I am not capable of implementing a system. As great as I think that system will be, there's no part of me that is willing to implement that system if it's going to cause just as much pain, just as much bloodshed, just as much chaos. What good is my bright idea if it's no better than what we currently have? I am not interested in a bloody revolution. Yep, sorry. If that disqualifies me and that makes me not a good communist or not a good socialist, then so be it. Because for many reasons. Number one, you're not going to win that fight. Hate to break the news to you. You're not. I'm going to sit on that. I'm going to sit on that one for a minute before I move on. I'm writing it on this paper as I talk to you. You will not win a bloody revolution. Ask me why. Good question. I'm glad you asked. Number one, if you got guns, they've got more. Oh, you got armored vehicles? They've got tanks. Oh, you managed to get tanks? They've got an air force. Oh, you managed to get an air force? They've got nuclear weapons. Game over. Period. Done. End of discussion. We are at what Francis Fukuyama referred to as the end of history, in the sense that we are frozen at a point in time where things really cannot afford to change much more. Now, I'm extrapolating from his theory to something that I argue on a regular basis, which is a part of the regime change theory. What is it called? Not regime change theory, but the power structure theory, which suggests that there is changes in power and changes in the structure in the world system based on the amount of power that a different regime has. And when powers become into parity, get close in parity, or great powers, the most dangerous time in the structure of our international system is when two powers get in parity, in closeness and proximity of their power. And that's the most dangerous time, because an ascending power thinks that they can take over the ruling power, and it becomes a huge conflict. That's a theory that I subscribe to. And part of that that I extrapolate from that is that we've changed the game so much now, where we're not talking about rocks and stones and then you win that war and there's a new empire. We're not talking about shields and spears, where now there's a new empire. The Romans overtake from the Persians, or from, I'm not saying this in chronological order. I'm just giving you examples where we're not at that point anymore, where we're talking about rifles or gunpowder being the new weapon on the scene, and that's a military advantage. And now the British gunpowder and rifles become the tool through which the British Empire is formed. And now we're not talking about changes in militaristic techniques and the train, giving the German nation, the Kaiser, ability to move his troops quickly to the front of a line and look as though that they're going to win World War I, but they end up losing. We're not talking about that kind of change in technology, where now we have automatic rifles, we have Air Force, we have all these types of things, and now we've fought wars where we no longer even have conventional wars anymore. Conventional wars can no longer change our system, because once we get to that threshold where a system is threatened, if American hegemony is ever threatened to the point where we feel as though it has an existential threat, what do you think they're going to do? And I went through all of that, as befuddled as it was going through. It wasn't as eloquent as I would have liked it to be, but I wanted you to see a demonstration in the fact that we are not going to have a change in this international system. There is not going to be a revolution that could be fought that will be a bloody revolution, because we're not fighting with sticks and stones anymore. We're not fighting with shields and spears anymore. We're not fighting with rifles anymore. We're fighting with a machine that has access to nuclear weapons, that has the ability to end existence as we know it, life as we know it. And because of that, if you have not calculated this into your grand theory of how we take over, if you have not calculated the fact that we are fighting up against a system whose number one national interest is capitalism, free markets. The number one national security interest of the United States are the free markets. If you have not calculated that into your calculus, then you're really just playing games, man. Long story short, we cannot have a bloody revolution because we cannot win a bloody revolution because they will blow the shit out of this entire planet before they turn over this world to anything but capitalism. Period. And that, I know nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. But what people would rather do is to sit around and pontificate about how bad capitalism is. Yes. And how much we need another world order. Agreed. But they will never give you a map to get there that does not include massive casualties. I mean, massive bloodshed. I mean, we're going to say, well, how's it going to be any worse than capitalism? Well, you know, there is a lot worse than what we have right now in terms of bloodshed. And I just don't get anyone. Well, actually, there is one person that I know. I'm not going to call his name because he's a friend of mine. But he said that he's willing, for the sake of the cause, to send as many troops as necessary to implement a socialist order and to maintain a socialist order. And he didn't care how many lives it cost. He's still a friend of mine. And I appreciate him saying that because at least he has considered that that is what's going to be required. I think that is the height of absurdity, but at least he's considered what is going to be required. Because most people aren't even willing to say that. Most people think that we're going to have this, you know, what's the phrase? It's gay space communism without bloodshed. And the whole point of me going on this tangent, to bring it back in, the entire point of me going on this tangent is this. I am not interested in implementing anything that's going to cost more lives than what we're currently shedding. Because why? Because the theory and the I want to say this precisely. The theory, the praxis, and the program are not as important to me as the humanity. And maybe at the end of the day, this is the crazy thing about it. A lot of people think I'm a neocon. A lot of people think that I'm militaristic, that I'm, you know, that I'm just not a good progressive in this regard. But at the end of the day, some of the things that makes me, in your opinion, not a good progressive is the fact that I'm probably more pacifistic than most of you. The fact that I do not want war, that I do not want bloodshed, that I do not want the expansion of an empire at the tip of a spear. Those are the things. That's why I got into this in the first place. Let me draw a corollary. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not that smart. Let me draw a picture for you to give you another example to explain what I'm talking about. I'm not fighting white supremacy to replace it with black supremacy. I had somebody look at me and say, "There's no such thing as black supremacy." Not in the structural sense, but in the application thereof. If there was an opportunity for some black people to be black supremacists like we have white supremacists, you better believe that there are black supremacists out there who want that opportunity. And I'm telling you, I am not fighting white supremacy to replace it with black supremacy. Likewise, I'm not fighting capitalism to replace it with socialism and communism if it's going to require as much blood as capitalism has required. Because at the end of the day, coming full circle, this has never been about just an economic system. For me, this has been about the empathy and the humanity and the preciousness of the human consciousness and what happens when a person is killed and the loss of consciousness. That to me is what is ultimately the most important. And I'm sorry. That's why it's easy for me. It's easy for me to empathize when somebody is killed. I don't care what side of the equation they are on. I don't care if they are an enemy or if they are a friend. I don't care if they are a friend and they're supposed, and the news tells me that they're supposed to be my enemy. I don't care if they're my enemy and the news tells me that they're supposed to be my friend. When a person is killed, I empathize with two things: the people who are left to mourn them, and the cessation of consciousness, because it is the rarest thing that we can't even begin to explain. So I'm sorry if that loses me followers and people who are saying, "Oh, Ben, you're not really good progressive." Well, yeah, well, kiss my ass. I'm not. Because if it's more important to you to oppose American empire, so much so that you cannot feel empathy for people, human beings, because they're on the wrong side of the empire, then you are not the type of person that I want in charge of a socialist empire. And if you have not considered the fact that for you to implement a socialist/communist empire and to maintain it, if you have not acknowledged the fact that that is going to look eerily like a capitalistic empire. Because what are you going to do, Catalonia, when you have right-wing extremists, right-wing capitalists who are in the streets? They look like, I mean, you think and you pause and you're like, that's a rebellion. That looks familiar. Man, I want to join that. But wait a minute. They're advocating, they're protesting in order to have capitalism again. What are you going to do? You're going to betray. The point is, folks, you know what? If you don't see the point by now, I'm just wasting my breath. So what do we do? What do we do is that God damn it, just be a goddamn human. Just pause. And before you service your idol, before you bow down before the altar of your economic theory and your altar of anti-warism and your altar of anti-imperialism, before you bend down at that altar, remember that people are human beings. And this system has made monsters and victims out of all of us. And before you open up your mouth, just be quiet and realize that it's okay, even if you can't fix your mouth to say something good or say something empathetic about a person that has been killed because they were a soldier. Just shut up. That's always an option. You don't even have to talk. How much time am I got? Where am I at on time? Right at 30 minutes. There's one other thing that I want to, I think I want to talk about. I don't know if I really want to talk about it yet. It escapes me. It sort of escapes me. It was really important, and I really don't want to hang up, because if I hang up, it's going to come right back to me. Well, so anyway, maybe I should. Maybe that's enough for today. Maybe that's enough. Listen, Patreon, patreon.com/the BPD show. Become a patron if you still like what I have. If you still like my message, become a patron, yeah, man. Oh, I knew I was going to come back. Part 2. Let's do part 2. Yeah, there you go. That's part 2. Okay. Check me out. Here's the other phenomenon that I'm observing that I think is going to lose me anymore. I've been losing a lot of followers. And I'm actually okay with it. It's totally cool. Like, I think over the last 2 weeks, I've lost like 500 followers. And I always give myself 9,000. If I lose more than 2,000, then maybe I need to re-examine what I'm doing, because everybody can't be wrong. I like to self-reflect long enough to be like, maybe I'm wrong. 100, 200 followers, nah, they could be wrong. 2,000, it might be me. But the reason I'm going on that tangent is this. I'm going to lose some followers with this next conversation. There is a phenomenon that I am observing that is quite hilarious and tragic at the same time. I'm going to try to be succinct with my words here, because we've already been here a long time today. It's this phenomena of people who are so anti-establishment, so anti-democratic party. Everything is anti-democratic party. And I get it. But when you cross the Rubicon and you've been so anti-democratic party so long that you can't realize, and you're still calling yourself anti-establishment, by the way, but you fail to realize that the current American establishment is completely controlled by the Republican Party and President Donald Trump. You're so anti-democratic that you forgot how to be anti-establishment, and now you found yourself being a Donald Trump supporter. Now, honestly, I don't even know why I started with all those caveats at the beginning, because if you really are like that, you're probably not listening. And if you are, I bid you adieu. Please go. Please leave. Please unfollow me. Unsubscribe. Do all those things. Because if you're at the point where you're so used to attacking the Democratic Party that you cannot find your way to criticize this administration, well, two things. You betrayed your anti-establishment bona fides. because anti-establishment means if your position is anti-establishment, then that means you are anti whoever's in control of that establishment. But a lot of people didn't have their political consciousness and their political awakening until this last election, 2015, 2016 cycle. That's when they got woke, and the political establishment happened to be the Democratic Party. And so they refined their gifts and their craft and their techniques to oppose the Democratic Party. And they're so good at it that now Donald Trump is in the White House. They don't really know what to do, because they can't really bring themselves to criticize Donald Trump, because in their mind, they feel as though criticizing Donald Trump is a positive for the Democratic Party. And so they simultaneously what's the word I'm looking for? I'm at a loss of words tonight. They simultaneously disdain, such an easy word. They simultaneously disdain the Democratic Party and the establishment, but they can't bring themselves to have a critique of the establishment because it's not the Democratic Party. Now, some obvious case studies or case examples of this would be H.A. Goodman. He's finally gone across the Rubicon and decided never to come back. And I actually applaud him for that. Is there an applause track here? I applaud him for that, because at least he's finally being true to himself. He's finally at the place where he's going to say, okay, I admit it. I don't want to criticize Donald Trump, because criticizing Donald Trump is so painful that because it means I feel like it supports the Democratic Party. And so what happens, though, this is the fascinating thing. Most people in this realm consider themselves to be anti-establishment, like I've already said, and they also present themselves to be anti-duopoly, like they oppose the two-party system. But they are so entrenched in their criticism of the Democratic Party that they end up subscribing to the two-party system. How? Because they do the same exact things that Republicans do. They criticize the Democratic Party and they protect Donald Trump from any criticisms. Don't act like you haven't seen people like this. I've seen progressives who have made this flip. One segue, Cassandra Fairbanks. I have to give her all the credit in the world. Even though I think her reporting is trash, and I think her white supremacy is even more trash, and I generally dislike every single thing about her ideology, I have to give her credit, because at least she had enough courage early on, immediately after the primaries, to not try to pretend as though she was progressive as much as she was anti-Hillary Clinton, and therefore she went to support Donald Trump. I could respect that in hindsight, because you have all these little people who are not true to themselves, who are lingering around trying to hold on to the mantle of being progressive, yet they protect Donald Trump from any criticism, despite the fact that everything that he's doing is anti-progressive as they come. Everything that Donald Trump has done is anti-progressive. He is engaging in the same militarism that you ostensibly oppose in Hillary Clinton. He's engaging the same spread of the American empire that you ostensibly opposed in Hillary Clinton. He's doing everything that you hated about Hillary Clinton, magnified by the order of magnitude of 10. And yet, you can't bring yourself to criticize Donald Trump because you're so used to being anti-Democrat, because you got woke when the Democrats were the establishment, and you can't fix your mind to adjust and say, well, the Democrats were the establishment, but now the establishment is controlled by the Republican Party. You can't fix your mind to say that. And so what do? You protect Donald Trump from criticism. Not because you like Donald Trump so much, but because you don't want the Democrats to have any positive outlook. You don't want anybody to say anything good about the Democrats ever. Yeah. And so you I love this. I love the fact that you inadvertently subscribe to the same two-party system that you have been disdaining all this time. There's something about Duverger's law that I think should be expanded beyond our type of representative democracy that lends itself to a two-party system, but should also be expanded to the critique of people who are trying to be on the outside of a two-party system, but your critique gets pigeonholed by your desire to not lend anything positive to one particular side of the ledger. In this case, Democrats, you don't want anything that could be misconstrued. You don't want to, by omission, uplift the Democratic Party. You don't want to tacitly uplift the Democratic Party. You don't want to say something negative about Donald Trump because you think it would be a positive about the Democratic Party. And I think that if somebody has done the research, maybe it's out there and I just haven't read it, but somebody should do a study on divergence law and expand that to people who try to be outside of the two-party system but can't bring themselves to offer critique of one side of the ledger, and they end up subscribing inadvertently to the two-party system. You fall right back into the partisanship that you disdain, that you ostensibly disdained. I mean, just admit it to yourselves. You were not a progressive as much as you were anti-Hillary Clinton. And supporting Bernie Sanders was just a convenient muse, a convenient cover for you. Because what's more important to you is to oppose the Democratic Party. You would rather see Donald Trump get a second term, despite all the things that he's doing to hurt marginalized people that I thought you cared about, despite all the things that he's doing to hurt black people, brown people, Muslims, LGBTQ people. I mean, all the things that he's doing to hurt these groups, all because it's a big fucking game to Donald Trump. You would rather see 4 more years of that than to ever give way to a Democrat. I'm sorry, but I think it's not what you call yourself that defines you. It's what you do that defines you. And the fact that you are doing the same exact things that a Republican, a red shirt Republican, a red team, rah rah sis boom bah, they see politics as a sport, as my team versus theirs. That's overly simplistic interpretation of politics. You, as the smart and wise and woke individual who's above the bipartisan or the duopolistic fray, you don't subscribe to the two-party system. You who are so smart end up doing the same goddamn things the ignorant ass Republicans do, which is they cannot, and for that matter, what ignorant Democrats do. They cannot criticize their team. They can't allow anybody to criticize their team because they can't ever say anything that the Republican Party is doing right. It's the same thing. It's the same phenomenon. Don't get me wrong. It's the same exact phenomenon. But the tables have turned here because Donald Trump is the establishment. And so what do? They try to cop out and say, oh, it's the deep state. It's not really Donald Trump. It's the deep state controlling or trying to hurt Donald Trump. And so we have to protect Donald Trump because, Zach Haller and Caitlin Johnstone, H.A. Goodman, the dumb left, all of you guys, just go ahead and put on your red shirts and become a Republican. God, please, because you're not progressive. You're not. But, besides those three, it's seeping in. Besides that group of dumb leftists, and I can't even call them the dumb left anymore because they're not really leftists anymore. They're just anti-Hillary Clinton. You can't be anti-war and still not criticize what Donald Trump is doing. Come on. Don't call yourself even anti-war. You're not anti-imperialism when you can't bring yourself to criticize Donald Trump. And it's not, what I was getting ready to say is this. I'm getting ready to go. It's not just the dumb left and the leaders of the dumb left who fall into this. There's average people that I'm observing this in. Like I said, I have large followings and I listen to a lot of conversations. I don't ignore most anything. I listen to everything that comes by. I filter it out in my mind. That's how I survive. But I'm listening to people who are making these same types of observations. Case in point, you could take the Sergeant LaDavid Johnson incident today with Democratic Congresswoman Frederica Wilson from Miami Gardens and President Trump. You could take this as an example. Somebody was in my timeline today, and I went to their timeline. I'm not going to lie. I went to their timeline because their gut reaction, their instinct, their knee-jerk reaction was that these no-good Democrats are just lying on Donald Trump. And I said, okay, if we're going to talk about lies and we're going to look at this objectively, I have nothing from Frederica Wilson that says that she is a habitual liar. Yet I have, over 1,700 lies that Donald Trump has been documented as saying. Some are pants on fire. Some are just like downright laughably false. Since he's been in office 10 months, that's like 170 lies a month. God damn, that's a lot of lying. That's more than 5 lies a goddamn day. So one person does not have a proven track record of being a liar. Donald Trump has a track record of being a proven liar. We didn't have evidence at the time of this conversation, but to me, the logical thing would be to say, one person is a proven liar, the other person isn't. Not that it means that because she is not a proven liar that she's telling the truth in this instance. But if we were to put them side by side and objectively look at it, what are the odds that this one is lying versus the other one? When it's a he said, she said incident, who has the reputation of being the liar, proven liar? And they couldn't accept that. They were like, oh, Ben, you're just being illogical. Oh, motherfucker, you're being illogical. Sway. I mean, seriously, think about this. Your knee-jerk reaction is to defend Donald Trump against the big bad Democrats, yet in your entire diatribe, you are disdaining the duopolistic system, the two-party system, and saying that these evil Democrats, you're not going to call yourself a Republican, but you're saying that these Democrats just want to lie on Donald Trump. So you're doing everything you possibly can to defend Donald Trump, and you want to tell me that you don't subscribe to the two-party system? You are by default, you are a de facto Republican because you're doing everything that a Republican would do. It's not what you call yourself that defines you. It's what you do. Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne, rather. It's what you do, Bruce, that defines you. You could tell me that I don't even have an example, or I don't know. You could tell, I don't know. I'm out of examples tonight, but you cannot tell me that you are not subscribing to the two-party system when your behavior is exactly like people in the two-party system, just because you think you woke and you're outside of the political fray. It's fascinating. I'm quite sure somebody can write up a game theory example that would demonstrate this very quickly, right? I'm trying to explain it just with words, but somebody could just draw this up really quickly and demonstrate when all of your behaviors, when you're trying to reject a negative, and I'm just making shit up at this point. Let me see if I could game this out real quick in my head. Not actual game theory. I'm just trying to, I'm not like, what's your boy? Hold on. What's the dude who said it's time for some game theory? I know. Please don't put me in his category. I'm just thinking this out loud. In your plot, I'm not even going to do it. I give up. I give up. Somebody smarter than me, go ahead and write that out. But I'm sure somebody can demonstrate that mathematically. That in your attempts to reject something that you perceive as to be negative, you end up subscribing to the same negative behaviors. And that's what I've been observing. I think it's fun. I think it's fascinating. I think if I wasn't trying to do this freestyle, I could probably sit down with a piece of paper and actually game this out myself. But I've seen it to be true in nature. I've observed it in nature. Now I just need someone smarter than me to actually write it out. That's it, folks. That's all the time that I have. Sorry, just kind of wanted to get some things off of my chest. Again, go to patreon.com and subscribe to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Become a patron and throw a couple dollars my way a month. Help our show go a little bit further, a little bit faster, a little bit harder. And I'll see you next time.